Back to stage now. Cyrano de Bergerac, The Night of the Iguana, Fathers and Sons. These are the plays you starred in the 70s. What made Cyrano such an attractive and enjoyable character to you?
Cyrano was so bright and so witty and so facile with language. Wonderful. He was a wonderful character. And so big-hearted and so brave and so terrified because he thought he was ugly and he thought no woman could ever love him because of his extraordinary nose. And it was just heartbreaking. And yet he was so generous. You know, when Christian is in love with the woman that Cyrano's in love with, he helped Christian fall in love with him and her, start this romance behind the scenes because he thought he was just too ugly to do it himself. And of course, Roxanne fell in love with Cyrano's words. She was really falling in love with Cyrano, but he didn't know that until possibly the very end. But I found him such a wonderful man, and the thing that makes drama interesting is obstacles, and his obstacle was his own sense of his own ugliness, which he wasn't really. He was a little hard to kiss, I guess, with a nose like that. But apart from that, he was. But I thought he was a wonderful, wonderful, superbly romantic man.
Then you played The Night of the Iguana in Los Angeles first, and a few months later in New York at the Circle in the Square Theater. This Tennessee Williams play, serious and intense, requires all the concentration one actor can give and more. But during a performance in New York, a few things happened. Would you like to share with us an unusual chain of events?
Dorothy McGuire played Hannah, and I was playing what is his name? My character. Very, very, very intense stuff. Highly dramatic stuff. My character actually goes crazy on stage at one point. And they have to tie him up. Well, anyway, there were these two kind of South American boys who have to tie Shannon up at one point because he's really going nuts. And there's a chaise longue, and they together tie him up every night, and that happens, and then he calms down. Well, in this one night, one of the boys was sick and couldn't perform, so one of the boys had to tie me up by himself. And he got himself sort of tied up with me and couldn't get her out. And it was a terrible mess, but we kept focused. And he suddenly got his leg out of whatever, and then he got away, and this scene progressed. And then, with one of the next scenes was a very intense scene between me and Dorothy McGuire, where she was sketching, sitting on a little kind of canvas chair, you know, one of those chairs like that. And she's sketching, we're having this extraordinarily intense scene, and the canvas splits and she lands on her ass on the floor. Somehow we kept going. I don't know how we did, but we didn't break. We didn't. And about 5 minutes later, in another intense scene, a great, big, huge woman sitting on the floor. We were playing in the Circle in the Square, which is in the round, and the audience is practically on stage. Well, this great big woman let out the noisiest fart I have ever heard. And the audience and Dorothy and I just lost it. We laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then managed to somehow get back on track after that had happened. Audiences are very forgiving about things like that. They suddenly realize that it's all a show and become aware of themselves, etc. And then they pull back together and the show pulls back together and you continue. But I couldn't believe that all three of those events happened on the same performance, in the same performance. It was just amazing.
Then came Fathers and Sons with Dixie Carter as your partner. You often mention this play as one of your favorite stage jobs. Why?
It's the only new play I've ever done, Fathers and Sons. So I was in on all during rehearsal, all the rewrites, all the changing. We changed the end over and over and over again. First of all, I killed my son, and then we tried that for a few nights, and then he killed me, and we tried that for a few nights, and then we killed each other, and I think that's how it ended up. But talking about chemistry, Dixie and I had this unbelievable chemistry on stage. First of all, I was Wild Bill Hickok, and she was Calamity Jane. We were very extraordinary, eccentric characters in this intense kind of love-hate relationship, mostly love. And there were some songs in it that came out of sort of nowhere. She had a wonderful song, and I had a song tied up on the bar. And Robert Allen Ackerman, who directed it, had filled the stage. It was obviously a Western stage. It all took place in this bar. And he had found all these sort of B-Western movie actors and hired them for this show. And so they were all people you sort of recognized from movies from your childhood as playing various cowboys hanging around the bar. And it was so fun to play. And Dixie and I got on so extraordinarily well. And everybody was wonderful in it. And it was new, it was breaking ground. So I think of it as one of the high points of my life.
In 1978, you directed a play, The Shadow Box, at the Williamstown Theatre Festival, and again the same play at the Charles Playhouse Theatre in Boston a few months later. Did you enjoy the experience of directing? And in Boston, did you at the same time play the part of Brian as you did in Williamstown?
No, I played Brian in Williamstown and directed. I found that very difficult. I sort of wish I hadn't played him. But I think that was the reason they allowed me to direct, is because I was in the play. And the actors in that particular production were wonderful and very, very, very cooperative with me as a director, because I didn't really know what I was doing. But I did find that I was more creative helping them than I am with myself in developing a role. Odd that. But that was a wonderful experience. And then I had other actors in the production in Boston. And I made it an awful mistake of intruding on them over and over again in rehearsal, saying, "Oh yeah, that's perfect, do it just like that." And then I'd get in, and then, "Oh yes, remember how you did that, because that's really perfect." And I sort of drove them crazy doing this. "Oh, here he comes," they'd say. And it wasn't a happy production, and they didn't. Partly because I was not doing my job very well. We didn't get on that well, and I thought, I'm not sure I want to be a director.
You have no less than 8 musicals in your scoreboard. With some of them, such as My Fair Lady and Sound of Music, you went on national tours either before or after Broadway. How does one prevent routine from settling in and make it sound as fresh as if it were the night of the premiere?
It's partly vanity. You don't want any audience to see you at less than your best. You just don't want that. But more than that, it's loving doing it and knowing you're in front of a whole new group of people every night. And thinking, maybe I can do it a little better. Maybe I can get a little deeper. Maybe I can get a little funnier. Maybe I can sing a little better, etc. So you have the challenge, at least I feel that, the challenge of getting it righter each time you do it. And just the love of doing it and vanity together, I think, keep you fresh.
You said once that you really found Professor Higgins when you went on tour in Europe. What had changed compared to the previous My Fair Lady production?
The director and I in the New York production have much to say to each other. I don't know why. But actually I found in the middle of rehearsal, I was practically suicidal because I wasn't finding Higgins, and I didn't want to sort of do a second-rate Rex Harrison performance. I mean, he was, obviously, it was his show. He was the master. But I didn't want to try to copy him, and I couldn't find my own way. And Howard didn't have much to say to me, and I almost got catatonic on stage. I almost couldn't do anything because I was so frustrated, but he wasn't very helpful. It's partly because he was, I think, in love with the leading lady, and they were very heavily together. But my old friend Joe Hardy, who had directed a number of other things, Cyrano among them, directed the production we did in Europe. And the set was more real and less surreal, and Joe was very, very helpful. And also I had pretty much found the character in playing it in America. But I felt it was, and altogether, it wasn't so much that I felt that I was much, much better in that production. I just thought the whole production was much better.
2 years ago, you played King Arthur in Spamalot.
Oh yeah.
In such a funny, off-the-wall comedy, actors must have played a prank or two on you. Do you remember any, and would you like to share them with us?
Well, the actor, Greer, I can't think of his name. Anyway, he played the Mad Frenchman up on the balcony. Well, it started out that we tried to make each other laugh. And it's very hard not to laugh on stage in that show, but one really mustn't. It's a kind of self-indulgence that actors shouldn't indulge in. But then we got to improvising insults. And that was great fun. And again, to keep a straight face and all. And for everybody on stage then, because we wouldn't tell anybody we were going to insult each other in these particular ways. And sometimes we just made them up on the spot. But that went on, and that was really fun. And he was very game. I can't think of his name. I
can't remember his name.
He was wonderful.
Yes,
he was just wonderful. Everybody in that production was terrific. It was a road company, but really first rate. And I loved doing it. I was so disappointed that I couldn't do it in San Francisco and Los Angeles. But they had just hired me for this 10-week period when they didn't have an actor, and they had already hired another actor for the end of the 10 weeks.
From which part you played on stage in films or in movies did you learn more?
Did I learn more about acting or learn more about life?
About yourself.
About myself. Oh, that's a toughie. Because one is always learning things about oneself as an actor. That's one of the nice things about acting, is you get to try out parts of yourself that the local bank manager doesn't have a chance to do, unfortunately. Probably in the more comic performances, like Spamalot, or The Good Doctor, or others, which I can't think of at the moment, but I'm sure, even Fathers and Sons.